Welcome back, everybody, to the ND and Free Podcast Plus here on Patreon. So each week I will take you through my intro. Just if you're a brand new listener, it may change over time, but it just sets the tone. So this is an in-depth podcast that dives into the science, the research, and the personal testimony of neurodivergent brain and body. Each week I will explore specific topics and reflect on what is known in the world of ND, and also hope to inspire you with my own thoughts on all the things that are brought up. I'm not an expert or professionally trained in neurodivergence directly. I am learning as I go and wanted to learn with you here. I've interviewed over 300 people on all things well-being, trauma recovery, and now neurodivergence. I have a life coaching qualification and I have been in health and well-being space for 10 years, including working with people as a massage therapist and personal trainer. I really want to help as many people as I can to feel that they can live their truth and feel seen, heard, and understood. ND is a good people who just deserve a chance to thrive in life. Right, okay, so let's jump into episode 1 here on Patreon. So I'll take you through a series of quotes that I have scoured the internet for, and I will reflect organically. So I'm not doing too much prep here. I'm just picking up quotes based on self-esteem and self-worth. This is a common thing in the neurodivergent community, and it's one of the biggest issues I have had, thinking that I'm good enough, as a stepdad, as a man in his 40s, providing for his family, earning enough money, and behaving in what would appear to be a 40-year-old man, adult life-looking thing. I feel younger than I actually am. I think that's due to the emotional instability and the struggles that are in my life. And I think it really affects who I am, who I feel I am. And it's really, really hard. So it feels like a really appropriate place to start. We'll also look at rejection sensitive dysphoria. We have covered this a little bit on the main podcast, but I think it's important to touch on this. So to stop myself going off on a tangent on these episodes, we jump straight into quote 1 and then open up on that one. So I'm going to be using Speechify. I find reading out loads of content, loads of quotes, loads of paragraphs just burns my brain out. So I'm using Speechify, and I picked, I think, a nice voice. Let me know if we need a different voice to read these quotes out for me to then follow on. So all of the sources for these quotes you'll see in the description below this video. You'll see all the links to where I sourced the information. So if you want to go and check it out, you can. And it also honors the author. All right, let's start with quote 1.
Quote 1. Stigma and misunderstanding also contribute to the increased likelihood of mental health issues. Neurodivergent individuals are often misunderstood or misjudged by others, leading to negative social experiences. This can result in low self-esteem, a sense of inadequacy, and increased anxiety. In some cases, individuals may feel the need to mask or suppress their neurodivergent traits to fit in, which can be mentally exhausting and detrimental to their emotional well-being.
Okay, that's a quote by Corey Jones. Check out the link below for quote 1. So this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because we will have our own opinion of how we are and how we behave, how we are our own people. We'll have our own thoughts about that. But the question is, where do those thoughts come from? Are they thoughts that have been sculpted and shaped by those around us, by our parents, by our caregivers, by our friends at school, who are finding our behavior unusual and they're questioning our behavior? The teachers who are saying we are a problem child and we don't listen and we don't have good work ethic. And obviously over time, events will show if we're struggling with exams and we don't get good results, or we can't hold a job down later on in life, that becomes a problem. Because it might feed a narrative that you've heard from the past from other people becoming true in your mind. And also you'll then create stories around why you can't do these things. Especially if you didn't know. So I didn't know until I was 41, which is problematic because I have at least 20 years of adulthood there to show what adult ADHD looks like without knowing I have it. So once you get the diagnosis, you're having to rebuild your sense of self, rebuild your self-worth and your self-esteem. And that's no easy thing. You have to literally see yourself in a new light. And with that, if you think about it, we all have, well, hopefully all have a set of values, things that a way of living, things that we live by that are really important to us. And we have to kind of establish what those are as well as a now diagnosed or self-diagnosed NDA. How do we know what we care about the most? And one of the traits for a lot of NDAs is this sort of sense of justice warfare. We really believe in things being right in the world. So that will feed into what your values may or may not be. But that's for another episode. But I just think it's an interesting one because the modern world and how it's set up means that we're not going to behave or manage or cope in a way that makes sense in a world with the inverted commas neurotypicals are on looking at us. So by us not quite being able to figure out how we sit in the structure of modern day society, in the Western world at least, America, Britain, parts of Europe, things like that, the way it's structured is quite similar. And we have to fit into that, right? Let's be honest, most of us have to have a full-time job. And I know for a lot of NDs that's burns you out completely and it's really hard. And it means you can't do much outside of work because you're so wiped out. So that then feeds your personal life, what you can and can't do in your personal life. Why can't I do this? It's so stupid I can't do this. And that all affects self-esteem, self-worth. So we're kind of stuck in a perpetual cycle. This isn't to be negative. This is about finding a way of finding this beautiful compassion for ourselves. So what actually matters to us, the way we live, does it really matter that we're not doing this or doing that or doing what everyone else is doing? Or is it more important to explore what we love, what we're passionate about, what we care about, loving that we like to maybe have time by ourselves and we like to get hyper-focused on our activities and projects? What's wrong with that? I'm hyper-focused on this podcasting. I've got another podcast as well. And I love it. It's not my favorite thing in the world to do, other than obviously spend time with my family. So just do it. It means that I don't really see my friends very often, and I don't do much. I don't go many trips, or I don't really go away on holidays or things like that. Who cares? You need to get to a place of like, this is what it looks like. The way I'm living isn't harming anybody, and that's kind of the way to look at it, I think. So this is good. It's a good way to start the episode here, actually. It just lays the foundation of so much of it is come to terms with our neurodivergence and then also having compassion for the way our neurodivergent presents and giving ourselves a bit of slack and letting ourselves off the hook a little bit and focusing on the kind of life that fulfills us on a deep level. Okay, let's look at quote number 2.
Quote 2. When we aim from early childhood to make a child appear less autistic or behave normally, we are feeding into a lifelong narrative for them that they are deficient in some way, that they are not enough. This message often becomes internalized and leads to children, especially those with low support needs, masking their neurodivergence to fit in and make friends. And if they cannot mask, they are frequently ostracized from society.
That's a very powerful quote by Laura Butafa. Butafa? I'm terrible at pronouncing names, just to let you know. So this is coming more back to the childhood aspect, growing up in school and how, especially for those on the autistic spectrum, that we have to fit into class structure and abide by the rules and the way the classes are sculpted by teachers and behaving in a way that our peers feel comfortable with. I mean, so much of what ND, any kind of neurodivergent brain and body, quite often we don't have control on the sensations that come up in our bodies and how our mind just goes off and does what it's doing. I think, like the quote says, there's so much masking that happens, which actually, in the end, number one, burns you out as a child, and you don't know that's what's happening. And also, you completely lose who you are in the most important time of your life, where you're discovering who you are, what it is to be human, what's important in life, what is the kind way to be in the world, what's good to avoid that could affect you in a negative way. You know, these are important things where we need to be completely free to tap into who we are as our little personality. And I think that's crushed by the school system generally, ND or otherwise. But for neurodivergence, it's very difficult if you're in a school, especially that doesn't have the support network, doesn't have a department of any depth that deals with these things. And adjustments aren't made for individual children who need very specific ways of being taught, which then doesn't happen, which means they fall behind. And then in front of their peers, they feel embarrassed. And that's heartbreaking. And it's going to destroy a child's sense of self and how they feel around their peers. And we all know that what that then leads to in adulthood is going to lead to all sorts of issues with anxiety and depression and sense of self and confidence, which means you don't push yourself, and being unable to cope with the sensations that come into your body because you never learnt how to deal with that as a child and set your nervous system up for a high window of tolerance and being able to go into the world fairly flexible. So it starts early, and we all may or may not have had the school reports, especially if you're listening and you've been diagnosed like I was. My mum found my school reports, and that was pretty heartbreaking to read because of the way they were writing about it. If he just applied himself or maybe if he focused, he could really shine. Loads of comments like that, which is completely inappropriate for someone with ND. So the generation that I'm in, late 30s, 40s, 50s, we are the generation which hopefully were the last ones to be fully ridiculed for what we couldn't do rather than what we could. And I think that's a big point. Focus on what we can do is so, so important. We will cover an episode on that, but what we can do is essentially something we should really be looking at. So, so important. So I think, yeah, there's so much more we could say about that, but I think I'll leave it there. But that journey through childhood, when you don't have ND, I just feel for those children. I feel for my inner child. It's very powerful. Okay, let's move on to quote 3.
Quote 3. Social difficulties play a significant role in shaping self-esteem for individuals with ADHD. Challenges with impulse control and attentiveness can lead to awkward or strained social encounters, which may result in misunderstandings, conflict, or even rejection. For example, someone with ADHD may interrupt conversations or lose focus during interactions, making it hard to form and maintain close relationships. These social difficulties often result in feelings of isolation, rejection, and exclusion, further eroding self-esteem and reinforcing a sense of being different or inadequate.
Okay, that quote is taken from Think ADHD. Like I said, the links are in the comments below. And I think social interactions, we can cover a lot more on this on a different episode, but I mean, wow, this is a big spectrum of experience, isn't it? I mean, we all find social interaction difficult in different ways. Sometimes actually it's okay if you're in the right group of people. So me being part of the ND community right now, since doing this, has been an absolute game changer, and it's been the most amazing time to feel not judged for once, or having to defend myself ahead of time on things that I'm going to struggle with or not do, or wherever it may be. But hey, people have, it feels like there's a guideline of how we should all socially behave, which kind of makes sense, I suppose, out there in the world. And if we don't fit that model, and that model might be slightly different depending on the community you're hanging out with, will determine how you feel about yourself and how they're going to react to you. And that then leads to how you feel about yourself. And I think it's tricky. I don't know about you guys, but I love being by myself quite a lot. I don't like to be around people for too long. I find it really overstimulating, and I just get so burnt out. But also my cognitive function goes down, where I'm trying to keep up with whatever's happening in the social situation and chatting. I do like to be moving when I'm hanging out with people. Like, I'd rather go for a walk and talk than sit in a coffee shop, or I'd rather play crazy golf and chat than walking around shopping, I guess. I don't know, things like that. I think you have to figure out what's the best environment and what's the best activity for you as you are conversing. I think that's the key. But also honoring how much time you can take socially before you hit that burnout wall, so to speak, low level burnout. It can get worse over time. And knowing what that is and then planning around that. And then you might find that difficult because you might say to someone, would love to see you, but I can only see you for 40 minutes. And then you feel like maybe a complete idiot because you're having to say, I can only do 40 minutes. And they might think that's weird. And then they may reject you because they're not getting enough time with you for them to experience what they're going through and feel seen by you. So resentment may form. So it's quite a complicated situation, isn't it? Because you need to honor your boundary. But then how do you sustain friendships where the people are understanding enough that they like you enough to hang out, but they know there's conditions to it? And I don't think people often like conditions to interpersonal relationships. So I feel for all of us because it's quite complicated. And I do think human interaction, no matter what our background is or what ND we have and what level of that, it is very important to have people in our lives generally for our overall well-being. That loneliness is such a big issue for so many and can really affect your health overall on all levels, mentally, physically. And there are things to be said for without having that supportive network. When things go wrong, you might need help. You can't access that help because there's no one to come and help you. And that can lead to more health conditions and make later life very difficult. So cis and no means easy and there's no key answer. But I think knowing what your limits are, knowing the environment you need to be in, the kind of people you need to be around, what kind of energy do they have, and what are the kind of things they're saying? Are they really supportive and uplifting conversations? It's just writing those things down so you can have a sense of who in your life fits really well into the social situations that you'd really like to experience. I think that's really important. And that's how I see it. I can sit and interview people on a podcast and make friends with people online all day long. But going out to a pub or a restaurant kills me. It's sensory overload. It's too much cognitive dysfunction, burnout. And I know I don't need that in my life. So I don't do it. And it's sad, I guess, that I don't get to go out to a nice restaurant, busy, successful restaurant, hang out with a load of friends. That is sad. But at the same time, I've got beautiful people in my life that I really care about. And how I see them and the way I see them is perfect for me. And if they like that, then that's enough. As soon as we start saying we should, we start to have problems. So that's a really big one here, I think. Okay, let's look at our last quote, which is touching on rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Quote 4. Individuals with ADHD are often subjected to more criticism than their neurotypical peers. Whether it's feedback from teachers about missed assignments or reprimands from parents about forgotten tasks, The constant barrage of criticism can take a heavy toll on self-esteem. Over time, this consistent negative feedback leads individuals to internalize the belief that they are inherently flawed, incapable, or simply not good enough. The problem is compounded when people with ADHD become their own harshest critics. Self-criticism is a frequent struggle, especially for those who have high expectations of themselves or who battle with perfectionism. Perfectionism leads to an unrealistic desire to perform flawlessly, and when individuals with ADHD inevitably fall short of these high expectations, they may feel deep disappointment, shame, and frustration. This reinforces a negative self-image, making it difficult to celebrate personal achievements or feel proud of progress, no matter how significant. The constant self-criticism can also worsen procrastination and avoidance, as individuals with ADHD may fear further failure or criticism. This can trap them in a cycle of paralysis, where they avoid tasks entirely to protect themselves from feelings of inadequacy, further deepening their sense of failure.
So that's a quote from Think ADHD as well. Check out the links in the description. So this is kind of tying up nicely everything we talked about here today. We're exposed to way more criticism. This leads to way more comments over time about the things that we're not doing right, things we need to be better at, and the things that we're failing at. And it's not to say that people with, say, strict, high achieving expectation parents who aren't ND aren't going to experience this. Of course they will. But if you have parents like that and you're ND and you're undiagnosed, really it just works against you in the end. Them wanting you to be better and to do more is actually actively making the person less capable over time by what it does to their self-esteem. And if I've learned anything from my stepson, who is coming up to 9 now, is, as college my partner is ADHD and due for an autism assessment next year or the end of this year, we can see it in him. And here's our chance. We are a generation where we can help him to feel seen for the beautiful being he is and let him know that it's completely normal to struggle with this, that, this, and that it doesn't make him dysfunctional or broken. Because when they get to this sort of age, they're starting to compare themselves to peers. They start to notice what it feels like to be embarrassed, and they want to look in a certain way. They want to wear certain clothes. It's very interesting seeing this happen now. And what kids really need is that supportive nature, that we're here for you. You've got this. Also, we can't excuse bad behavior, but we have to have the context of the bad behavior. So if they're not harming anybody, that's one thing we can then, that's fine, that's good. But obviously, inappropriate behavior is not an excuse. We can't use ND as an excuse to continue that sort of behavior if it's the environment or the people who are causing triggers for that to take place. So the best way to support them is to put them in an environment where they can thrive rather than be triggered, because it's not their fault they're getting triggered. So it's a complicated one. That's for another episode. But I just think with the rejection sensitive dysphoria, the reason as adults we may find rejection so horrific, so it can cause us to get really fight and flight and angry and defend ourselves and be oversensitive, or it can put us into our what they call the dorsal state, so into complete shutdown, where we just hide and we just disappear, right? They're kind of like key ways that we deal with that. And people think, oh, it's not a real thing. But the point is, it's linked to how with neurodivergence we can be highly sensitive to things that are happening around us. But because our emotional center is so vast, we can feel things so deeply and in an instant. That's why we find rejection so difficult, because it's like a massive tidal wave, which our autonomic nervous system is not catching. So our system should naturally be able to regulate itself on some level to help us through emotional times. But that system doesn't function correctly. Therefore, we are completely open and vulnerable to any emotional wave based on what we experience. So when you look at it that way, imagine as a kid if you had that and then you're getting constantly criticized lightly or badly on that's a spectrum in itself, and what that does to our mindset internalized. Because look, at the end of the day, our parents or our caregivers are our caregivers. We haven't chosen them. We can't get away from them. We can't take care of ourselves as a child. It's not possible to have someone to live, feed ourselves as a 9-year-old. So you have to change your behavior and your character around your caregivers to make sure you're safe, that they stick around, and that they're going to care for you. So you have to mask, you have to shape who you are to fit into that community, your family dynamic. And that's, again, pretty heartbreaking. And it means that we're hearing criticism and other things X amount more than a non neurodivergent person. So that is to say that a non-neurodivergent person wouldn't feel it really affect them, but they don't feel it so deeply. So it doesn't code your way of behaving so deeply that when you get to adulthood, you're incapable of receiving any negative feedback, perceived or otherwise, because you've been trained since childhood to number one, avoid it, but it's such a heightened thing that's got been made more heightened by childhood experience that it makes adulthood very difficult. So what happens to us then with rejection is detrimental to us as adults. And I think what then does happen is when you get autonomy and you move out of your family dynamics and you go out into the world, you're so sensitive to RSD, you will, or this is just my experience, obviously, I say you as in me and maybe some others, shape the way you live your life to avoid feeling those things. You know what it feels like? It's horrible. I don't want it. So you, for example, like me, multiple qualifications, very intelligent, good with people, very loving, very passionate, but I've always been in low paid jobs, a lot of sort of manual based jobs because I don't want to be around people too long. So I never have enough money, constantly getting into debt and then getting out of debt and then getting into debt. And obviously I feel like I'm good at this sort of thing, but it's hard to make financial success. So when you look at it that way, it means that at 41, I've not really progressed in any careers and I've lost the ability to know what career I want because I spent my whole life avoiding feeling uncomfortable, which means I don't take opportunities, I don't see opportunities, I don't grow, and that means that I don't have enough money to take care of my family correctly, and that's heartbreaking, affects my self-worth, and we go in a cycle. So anyway, that all sounds very depressing, but it's not meant to be. Since diagnosis now, I'm a good being, and I'm doing some beautiful things out there in the world like this. I love doing this. I love doing videos. I love podcasting. I love creating content. I love all the behind the scenes, the editing. I love it. So maybe I should look at working in the podcast space. But would I want to work with people where I'm editing for them? Am I going to find that difficult if I don't edit it in the right way? Probably. So I had to decide whether I'm going to get coaching or get support or have medication to help me better cope, or do what a lot of NDs do, is go entrepreneur on this, which is what I'm doing. I'm here, I'm sat with you. I feel like I'm creating content and a community that is worthy of a financial energy flow. I'm taking a leap and I'm going for it. May I get rejected by people who don't want to join this? Of course. I hope I don't get rejected from inside the community. That'd be terrible because the whole point of the community is it's a positive space. But if I want a chance here, maybe I want to work part-time and do this. I need to earn money through doing all of this. So I've got to find ways of doing that and feel like I'm good enough. And it's okay to ask you, the listener. It's okay if you pay your £5 a month plus whatever fees are on top of that. Is that okay? Oh God. But I'm going to have to take the leap. This is something I'm good at. So that's a little message for you. I think a positive message is find some maybe unique way you need to look at to kind of figure out how you can make life work where you thrive, but you're not exposed to that emotional tidal wave of life. So yeah, let us know in the comments actually if this is this episode. in the comments. Let us know if you found ways to make the qualities that you know you have work for you in a way that builds a life for yourself, because that's sometimes the hardest thing to figure out. So it's important. So there you go, guys. I'll leave that there today. This is my first time doing this, so I'm not sure how this will be for the listeners. So let us know if it feels good for you. And I just been really organic, really. We have our quotes. We play the quotes out, and I reflect on it. So just simple stuff, and that's the most my capacity can do. And I'm trusting in my own knowledge that I can pull this off. So I hope I've done a good job of it. So yeah, I'll be attempting to do this every single week. Um, and and yes, please, if there's certain topics you would love me to cover, then let me know in the comments too. Hey, can you maybe talk about this? I'd love to. I'd love to do some research on that and then sit here and talk with you guys. So that would be brilliant. But other than that, thank you so much for being here and supporting. It's going to take time to grow. I want it to be a positive space. We all have to be very kind here to each other, no judgment. And obviously look out every Tuesday, every Saturday where you can share what you're struggling with on a Tuesday and your wins on a Saturday. So that's a chance for us all to learn from each other, I suppose. Good way to see it. But yeah, head over to our main show. Obviously, I'm releasing podcasts all the time over there, interviewing coaches and other NDers. So loads of content, and obviously years of other content on there too about trauma recovery and things like that. So plenty to go round. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week. Once I've decided on the topic, I will let you know a few days before what's coming up next. But that's it. That's a wrap on episode 1 of the ND and Free Podcast Plus on Patreon. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.